Good evening and welcome to today's Ask the Expert webinar on getting started in private practice. Thanks again so much for joining us. In the spirit of reconciliation, Avant acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. We have a lot of people online with us today, which is really fantastic to see. And it just shows what an important topic this is for new fellows and for trainees. When you start to think about moving into private practice, there are often questions that you don't even know to ask, or if you do know the question, you're not entirely sure who to ask. So tonight we hope that our panel of experts can help you with some insights. At Avant, we're delighted to continuously support our members with educational events like tonight. You'll be receiving a recording of tonight's discussion, as well as links to additional resources and the websites that are referenced by our panel. We also encourage you to visit Avant's website, where you can find dedicated tools and resources to help you transition into private practice. These include business planning, marketing, accreditation, and best practice policies and procedures, as well as advice on how to manage your practice staff and patients. So with so many people joining us tonight, we'll have to keep you on mute, but we do want this to be an interactive session. So please send any comments or questions to our panelists via the chat function. And as I mentioned before, this can be found at the bottom of your screen on your toolbar. I want to mention that the advice here today is general advice. If you are an Avant member, we invite you to contact our medico-legal advisory service for any specific questions that you have. And if you're not yet a member with Avant, please give us a call to discuss how Avant can support you at this really critical stage of your career. At the conclusion of this webinar, you'll be asked to fill out a short survey, which you'll need to complete to receive your CPD points for tonight. We really appreciate if you could take the time just to give us your feedback, but also share with us your topic suggestions for future webinars in the comments section. So we have a full panel of experts for you tonight, and I'll hand over quickly to Rocky Ruperto to kick us off. Rocky is the Legal and Policy Officer for Avant. He's also a solicitor in the Medico-Legal Advisory Service. He advocates for changes to health-related legislation, regulation and policy, aiming to make a positive difference to the practice of medicine and the Australian healthcare system. Thanks so much. Over to you, Rocky.
Thank you, Michaela, and thank you all for joining us. It is a great topic. I love tonight's title, Thriving, Not Surviving, moving into private practice. And that's really the aim of tonight, to give you the tools to make the most of this great opportunity. I am joined by some great panelists tonight. We have Angela Mason-Lynch, who's a risk advisor at Avant. Ange has extensive experience managing practices of various disciplines and sizes, so she'll have lots of good information for you. She's also worked as a board and expert committee member for multiple healthcare bodies. She'll be able to give that real regulatory insight as well. Dr. Victoria Fan is a general practitioner in an inner city practice in Sydney. And she also works part-time with us here at Avant as a risk advisor, and she supports and advocates doctors of all career stages. And I'm really pleased to have David Williams on board. He's a practicing neurologist and the founder of Australia's largest private neurology practice. And as if that didn't keep him busy enough, he's also the managing director of Hoxton's Medical Practice Management. And he was really inspired to develop that model for outsourced practice management as a result of his own experiences moving from registrar to specialist. So the time that you guys find yourselves in now. So he'll be able to give us a lot of helpful information. Now, we know that moving into private practice can be exciting, but it can also be really daunting. And that's the experience that I find speaking to doctors on our medico-legal advice line. There's lots of new or unfamiliar responsibilities for you all. So we're going to try and clarify a few things tonight. We're going to talk about things like the costs involved, starting a practice, how to grow your patient base, and also how to advertise in a way that doesn't get you into trouble with AHPRA or the boards. Now, we aren't going to talk about things like corporate structures of your practice, partnerships, financial strategies, or taxation laws. Now, these are critical for you as a small business owner, so we do highly recommend that you go see specialist accounting, legal, and financial services organizations or people for those answers, and they can really take into account your situation. So to start off, to get us all warmed up, we're going to kick things off with a poll. And it's really just to understand what career stage you're currently at. So hopefully that poll's showing up now. Here you go, and you can see your options there. And while those results come in, I'm going to ask Vicky, who is our voice of the audience tonight. Vicky, you recently fellowed and moved into private practice. So would you be able to tell us a little bit about the challenges you encountered when you became a fellow and had to make the decision between going out on your own or joining a group practice?
Well, thanks, Rocky, and thanks for the introduction. So like Rocky said, look, I'm a GP and I've fairly recently fellowed, so I can definitely empathise with, I think, a lot of our audience tonight. And look, I think, Rocky, it's still a question I ask myself today. It's still a big challenge, and it's probably one of those things that just don't get taught in medical school. And so it is a little bit of learning on the job, sort of as you go, learn from others, and it can be a little bit haphazard at times. I think for the GPs and the GP registrars in the audience, you can probably empathise that it is, and it still is, every day a steep learning curve. I mean, in GP land, we pretty much are thrust into private practice as registrars. You might be a PGY3 entering GP training, and here you are being employed for a private practice, and you're expected to know the ins and outs. And the reality is, I think most of us don't know, and we just have to learn on the job. And it's really difficult because you're balancing training as well as learning the ropes of how to negotiate your contract all at the same time and studying for exams. It's pretty overwhelming. I think for our specialist colleagues, I think that, most of our training is done in the hospital. So you don't really get that primer into private practice until you've pretty much fellowed. You finished your last year of advanced training or fellowship, and then here you are thrust into private practice, and supposedly you're supposed to know what to do. So it can be really, really challenging to decide, do I join an existing practice or, do I start my own, and how do I go about that? No one even tells you, what do you do when you get that letter from your college saying, hi, congratulations, you've fellowed. What do you do next? No one tells you you've got to send that letter to AHPRA, how to get your provider number, how to connect yourself up on PROTA, what is a BAS, what's an ABN, and hopefully, David tonight will be able to shed some light on, some of those queries that I certainly had when I first started. So one of the things I've learned so far is you've got to know who to ask and where to go to get that help, because it's not something that you just naturally learn in your training.
Yeah, gosh, it sounds like there is so much to juggle while you're finishing training to become a real specialist, a scientific specialist. You also have to juggle everything that comes with being with a business person, and they're two different disciplines. So I don't envy you at all. We do have the results that have come in. So I wonder if they're going to pop up on the screen. You can see that most of you joining us tonight, 42% are recently or about to fellow, closely followed by fellowed in the last 3 years. So you guys know what we're talking about tonight, some of these challenges that Vicky has already pointed out. And so without further ado, I think we might cut to David. David, from a business perspective and from your own experience, but also speaking to new fellows, what do you see as the advantages of joining an already set up practice?
Yeah, thanks, Rocky. So that big daunting step of being in your books, studying, passing exams and working out how to be a real doctor, then jumping into being a real doctor is scary enough. So jumping into a small business and working out how to do practice is just easier, right? If you do it with other people. If it's already set up, if there's systems in place, if there's a referral base or a group of patients that are already coming into a real estate scenario that's been negotiated already, it's just easier. So joining a group practice definitely reduces the barriers of entry. That's really important for people that might be lack confidence about their business prowess, or know that they've got to spend some time developing that group of skills. Obviously provides a ready-made infrastructure, which saves time and probably saves money as well in those first early years, and allows doctors to join a community of colleagues around them to help them. So those things are important: lower barriers, lower cost, faster entry, and colleagues around to support. They shouldn't be underestimated. They can be really important. However, that can provide a false sense of security. And now, first of all, congratulations to the people on this call today, because it's fantastic they're actually asking these questions. And I'm here to warn you that if you are joining a group practice, particularly if you're buying in or taking some sort of stake, you're actually inheriting the strengths, but also the weaknesses of that practice. There is the financial risk of inheriting debt, for example, or inheriting the responsibility of employing staff that might have been there for 15 years with long service leave entitlements that allow them to go away for 6 months on full pay. So there are risks that are financial, but also there might be bad and inefficient operations that are in place. So there might be too many staff, the payroll might be too high, the wrong type of documentation and record keeping systems might leave the compliance risks there that you don't know about and you don't know how to ask about. So it's important to consider that potential for false sense of security. And finally, if you are joining a group because it's easy, I think it's really important to ask, is it going to be good for your personal brand in the medium and longer term? If I'm an orthopedic surgeon joining a large group of orthopedic surgeons, if I'm the 12th surgeon in the list, how good are the operations I'm going to get? I'm probably going to get the worst ones until the oldest 5 or 6 orthopedic surgeons retire. Even then, I'm not guaranteed. So do you have a brand that can get you where you want in your professional career? And that has to be balanced against the ease of just jumping into a group practice. One thing is for sure, that every single doctor in Australia has the potential to make money out of their business because it's underwritten by the government. Medicare helps us all earn a living from medicine. So don't be too scared about the financial cost of investing in an outcome that is different to joining a group practice.
Thanks, David. There sure is a lot to think about there. And I think, what really is showing how important it is to engage some experts. So engage, a lawyer or somebody to really help you understand, if you are taking a stake in a business, what liabilities you are taking as well. But you spoke a lot about costs there, and tonight's webinar is all about pulling the cover off some of the more awkward topics or things that we don't often talk about. What is the cost of setting up a practice? Can you give our audience tonight a ballpark figure or things they should be looking out for?
Right. Yeah. And, who do you ask that question to, right? What I did as a neurology registrar is I started learning from my mentors by actually asking them, what do they charge for a new patient? What do they charge for a review? How many clinics did they go to when they graduated or when they, finished their training? How much they spend on secretaries and that sort of thing. So it is possible to ask those uneasy questions to your mentors, because kind of your mentors should be training you. So this information is not secret, but it is a bit nerve-wracking to ask it sometimes, I understand. So let's talk about a little bit about the costs. And look, I'll talk in general terms. It's a bit different in primary care, where you are building in a GP practice, you're building a community-facing practice, whereas in non-GP specialist practice, you're really facing a referral base, which is a bit different. You have to go through a referral base to get your work. The costs are kind of similar, and probably no GPs are going to start their own practice as soon as they've finished their fellowship training. So the biggest cost, absolutely the biggest cost in starting your own practice, is doing things improperly, making mistakes, or actually not doing your homework. So regardless of the $50 you might save here or there on a cheaper computer or an insurance policy that might be $20 more or less, the biggest cost you can make spread out over your whole career will be setting up things wrongly in your practice when you start up. So do the research and speak to the experts, speak to your colleagues, speak to your mentors, speak to a practice management company, speak to practice managers, speak to Avant, and find out about it. So what do you do? So you can invest in advice. You're going to spend $3,000 on your accountant to find out how to structure your financial handling systems and your business, $2,000 on legal advice, and several $1,000s on getting management setup advice. So how do you set up your HR systems and your contracts? It's about the same cost whether it's a 1-doctor practice or a 4-doctor practice from that perspective. You're going to have to spend money on branding, signage, website, marketing, that sort of stuff. And if someone's just writing this down on the back of an envelope, I think it's worthwhile putting around $10,000 or $15,000 aside for that. Now, do not spend $15,000 on a website. There's plenty of web designers who will charge you that, but you need to spend $2,000 or $3,000 so you've got at least a professional looking website that works. You don't want one that doesn't work. Your patients and referring doctors are not going to like that. That's just some stuff you might not have thought about. If we think about the other biggest cost of a practice, it's your HR and your payroll. So how much are you going to spend on a secretary? Well, if you quickly do $25 an hour times full-time employment for a year, $25 secretary, you might think is going to cost you about $52,000, $53,000. In fact, a secretary who's paid $25 an hour, it will cost $75,000 a year. The reason for that is you've got to cover them when they're on sick leave. You've got to cover them when they're on annual leave using temps. You have to pay work cover. You have to pay entitlements like long service leave and other entitlements that might be associated with your practice. And you have to train them. You have to hire them. You have to replace them when they go backpacking after 18 months or get pregnant or go for another job somewhere else. So that's $75,000 a year for a secretary. And even then, they're not covered for lunch breaks, and 38 hours a week is not 9 to 5 every day. So that's a starting cost for HR. Again, if you're jotting stuff down, we're going to re-watch this. $6,000 to $12,000 a year for software per doctor. Obviously, it gets smaller if you've got a bigger group practice, but you've got to put that aside. The real estate's going to be about $25,000 for 60 square meters, which is enough for 1.5 or 2 consulting rooms and a little bit of waiting room. Your fit out and furniture, well, obviously that depends on how much you're going to invest, but that can depreciate over time. Probably another $8,000 in other setup costs. So we're looking at a reasonable amount of money. We're up to about $120,000 plus your fit out if you're going to have staff, real estate, and so on. And that's without the legals and advice that we've spoken about before. So about $120,000 a year just to run a practice, which means that a doctor's going to have to bill more than $120,000 a year just to be ahead. How can you reduce your costs? How can you make sure you don't make a mistake? Well, obviously get the advice, make sure that your decisions are not mistakes and so that they end up not costing you more down the track. But also look at sharing secretaries. Share a secretary with a colleague, have a part-time secretary who works in your room and outsource the telephone calls for someone else to pick up the telephone when you're doing your public work, or if you're in a GP practice struggling to grow, can't afford lots of staff, get the call overflow service so that telephones can be answered off-site. Be modest on your real estate requirements, maybe go for the cheaper option and pimp it up on the inside rather than paying top dollar for the biggest suite on the high street. So, Rocky, we're talking about $120,000 a year before you're ahead if you're starting up a practice. And that's a functioning practice, but there's cheaper ways of doing it by outsourcing your telephones, your typing, making sure your bookkeeping's done by someone who can do it and you're not making mistakes. Is that a scary number?
Yeah, certainly scared me and made me thankful that I'm a lawyer for events and not setting up my own practice. So no, thank you for really lifting the lid on that. It is a question that I'm sure is on everybody's mind, starting a small business of their own, and they can't really turn to anyone and ask them because they just need that honest advice. And it really sounds like an investment in yourself. And as a doctor, you are the product, and the healthcare service that you can provide is the product. So it really does sound like a long-term investment, but trying to get it right at the beginning does sound like you can save a lot in the future. Yeah. So I'm going to move to Ange now, who is uncharacteristically quiet. Angela, you consult a lot of doctors in this area when they're starting up practices or even when they've been in practice for a long time and need some help. So can you please let us know what you advise doctors from a risk advice perspective when it comes to setting up a practice?
Yeah, thanks, Rocky. And David, that was great. And David has touched on a few of the issues that do end up being a concern for us, certainly at Avant, when we, when problems come across our desk that we've got to help you as our members resolve. So let me first talk about an existing practice. So often there is this false sense of security that doctors have when they move into an existing practice, but it's a real worry, because very often the staff that you're inheriting are actually not good staff, and they're actually not managing your risk, they're increasing your risk. So I always recommend, and we always recommend from risk, that you really do your research on the people that are in the team. How are they trained? When was the last time they were trained? How are they supported to make sure that they're doing the right thing? Who's watching them? Because, you know, you're in the room consulting, and these people are out there answering the telephone to your patients, saying goodness knows what. They're, you know, double booking you because they're just trying to get the patient off the line. There's all these things that are happening that are actually increasing your risk, not reducing it. And many, many claims that we deal with are because the staff have done something wrong and haven't known they've done it wrong. If you're considering a practice, ask those relevant questions and don't let the wool be pulled over your eyes. The other thing, and a doctor said this to me many, many years ago, he said when he decided on a practice to work in, he walked in and he thought, could I be married to these people in this practice? Because the amount of time you're going to spend in your practice is probably the amount of time you're going to spend with your spouse. So, and you don't just choose a spouse because it's easy. You really research it. You make sure that that spouse suits you. So make sure that you actually think, I can come into this practice and I can be married to it. I can, you know, I can voice what I have to voice. I can hear what I have to hear. I can speak to these people that are surrounding me and feel comfortable with, you know, the conversation. So think about, can I be married to this practice? The other thing is, how do you make sure that the processes are right? So let's say you want to do procedures and you're using sterile equipment. So how do you know it's sterile? How do you know that the equipment you're using is being maintained, and, you know, the equipment that they're providing for you that you're probably paying for in a percentage? How do you know that that's not opening up your risk? So ask those questions as well. Show me how sterilizing works in this practice, please. If you're in general practice, a lot of times they go, oh, it's an accredited practice, so I must be safe. It's a bit of a false sense of security as well, because a lot of practices scrape through accreditation and then they let their guard down and all of a sudden you're at risk again. So do your due diligence and check. Think about, if I owned this practice, what would I be worried about? And then ask the practice manager or the principal that you're dealing with those sorts of questions. Look at the software. The software can be your biggest problem when you're moving into an existing practice. You might inherit software that's really crap. And let's face it, software can slow you down, so you end up with more time poverty. But the other thing that it does is it might not manage your high risk areas like your recalls and your reminders, your results coming in. It might not talk to the relevant other portals that it needs to talk to, like other specialists or hospitals and things like that. So you could walk into a practice with really poor software. So you're probably saying, well, how do I know what's good and bad software? This is where you ask your colleague, you look at what other people are using and whether it's working for them, and think about those things that you need and want. So you want a good recall system. You want to be able to make really thorough medical records. So you might rely on autofills that will prompt you, say, for your consents, or you know, to prompt you in a telehealth consultation. You might rely on your software to give you prompts around that. A slow software, so if you walk into a practice that hasn't invested in their server and you've got slow software, I'm telling you now, you will be tearing your hair out. So ask those questions as well. How often do we have problems in this practice with, you know, the computer's not working? And what do we do if the computers stop working for some reason? And be careful if you are visiting multiple practices. So if you join an existing practice and you're going to different sites, or if you join a couple of practices, remember that your responsibility to check your reminders and, you know, your pathology and more your pathology and your recalls and your correspondence, your responsibility to check that within a timely within a timely time frame doesn't go away. So you've got to think about, how can I check this when I'm not at this practice? What can I do? Do I get remote access, which a lot of practices don't like giving you? Or is this practice in the cloud, and so I can then access it from the cloud? I can access my information and my results from the cloud. Really, really important. And there's some great cloud services evolving. Now, sorry to take up so much time. I'll quickly go through new. A lot of the things that I've already talked about, you'll be considering when you open your new practice as well. But one of the things that we think is really important for you to consider when you're opening a new practice is, it's not just about how much money you're going to make. You know, if you go into a new practice thinking like that, you're going to end up bald at, 30. So, or, very stressed. So I think you need to think about lifestyle as well. What am I going to still love in 10 years time? What do I need to surround myself with that I'm going to still, that's going to make me still love this practice in 10 years time? Who can support me in what I'm doing? Who can make sure that I am living the dream with a practice that I wanted? Who can help me get that? What sort of people, and what do they look like? I so often see doctors open a practice and employ a staff member that knows the software really well, or has worked with the orthopedic surgeon down the road and now he's retired, so wow, she's going to come and work for me, yay, I scored. No, that's not what should make you consider who you're going to employ. Think about, is this person, again, am I going to be married to her or him, and are they going to support my vision? And I'll just leave you with a little message on this note, and that is in McDonald's, the fast food store. They're very clear with their vision. They change it quite frequently. But when they first, I don't actually know what year it was, but it was quite a few years after they launched McDonald's. But when they decided on their vision for this year, their mission for this particular year, their vision was very brief. It was quick service, clean toilets. So just with those words, every single one of their staff knew that every shift they have to check the toilets, right? Now, I've walked into practices where I say to a doctor, what's your vision? What are you trying to do here? And they'll say, we're trying to build, we really want as many patients as we can. And then I ask the receptionist, what's your main vision here? And she says, I just want to deal with the patient standing in front of me. I ignore the telephone. I kid you not, that actually happened. So I had a doctor that was paying her wage who was saying, we want to build the practice, and her saying, I don't answer the telephone because I'm too busy with the patient in front of me. Typical of an incongruent vision. And that's actually the owner's fault, because the owner needs to talk to their people about the vision that they've got, and then give them the values and the behaviors that go with that vision. So I think that's probably brought me to the end of this question, Rocky.
Thanks, Ange. Lots of good things to think about there. And I think we all know McDonald's vision, because I'm sure we've all used their clean toilets, on a road trip or something like that. So thank you. But we have had a good question come in from the audience. Both you and David spoke a lot about the pros and the cons and things to look out for. But David, quite simply, is the monetary benefit from owning your own practice better than joining an existing practice?
The answer is usually yes, but you have to be patient. So again, if you're making the right decisions early on, then you're going to lose less money than someone else. But if you're in complete control of your business, then you'll get the benefit of that as it grows down the track. If you're buying into a practice, or if you're joining a practice as an associate with no financial interest, you may be earning more in the first few years, but it's going to stay at that plateau. So when you own your own business, you've got a bigger trajectory overall about how much you can earn. then there are the possibilities of owning the brand and passing on the goodwill and the patient list to other doctors down the track. That can be hard, and who knows how any of us are going to be in 25 years' time when we want to get rid of our practices or whatever. But simply, if you've got control over it, you're going to make more money than in someone else's practice.
Thank you. So I'm going to take that
On
as
average.
a usually yes, but it's a long-term game. Thank you, David. And I'll just point out that, coming off what Angela said about risk, what we're talking about here, and, having those good systems in place and having medical record software that can have recalls and reminders, the end game there is to practice healthcare that meets a standard and you not getting into trouble with your patients later on, whether it be through civil claims of compensation, so patients suing doctors for adverse outcomes, or even complaints with regulators, which we see a lot more of at Avant compared to actual civil claims for compensation. So we are going to stick with the topic of money for a little bit longer. We're going to pop up the second poll question now. You should be all seeing it soon. It's what percentage of your billings do you expect to pay towards expenses? So all these things we've just spoken about. I'm going to throw to Vicky while we wait for the answers to come in. Vicky, was it tricky to talk about this sort of issue or to negotiate what percentage of your billings would go to paying for expenses?
Absolutely. I think for anyone that's sort of starting in private practice or, starting off in the world, you don't know what the market rate is. And, you can only rely on your colleague, someone before you, a couple of years, oh, hey, like, what did you negotiate? So it's really, really tricky. And I think as doctors, at least for myself, it's certainly not natural to talk about money. You're sitting there and here you are, trying to sell yourself as a really good doctor and a good fit for this practice. And then on the other hand, you've also got to negotiate, well, how much is my, how much am I worth, and how much of, am I willing to contribute for the expenses, and you just don't know. So I think it's a really awkward topic, and often even within one group practice, I think the guy next door to you don't even know what percentage he's on. So it is a very, very tricky topic, but hopefully David can lift the lid on, I guess, what the market rate is.
I guess there's two ways of looking at it, isn't it? So you mentioned, Vicky, that you're paying a percentage to a group practice. Well, the other way to think of it is, well, what does the practice who's the owner of that practice, what are they paying in their expenses? So that's probably a good starting point to think about, what as a contractor or someone working in that practice, what would you pay? So what does it cost to run a practice? What percentage should a practice that's billing an ordinary amount of money spend on their expenses? Obviously, it depends on how much you're earning, right? So if you're charging at the highest tier of charging for any item number, then presumably your costs are going to be lower in a percentage sense than someone who's just bulk billing, obviously. So the first question is, where do you start pricing your actual services? So not as the contractor who's going in paying 30% or 40% or whatever in a group practice, but as a person starting off in private medicine, whether you're consulting in your own room by yourself or with someone else, how much of your revenue is going to go in your expenses? What does a practice pay to run? The benchmarks can tell us about this. Usually, if your costs of running your practice are less than 30%, you're doing pretty well. Okay, that's on average. Now, some doctors who might have $10,000 surgeries they're doing several times a week, we hope the percentage of running their practice is very much lower. Doctors that are bulk billing doing 3 or 4 sessions a week, it's probably going to be a little bit higher than that. But on average across the board, if we look at most practices, if you're running under 30% of your revenue as your cost base, that's pretty usual. Now that's for doctor fees. I guess there's other ways of getting revenue from grants and nurse funding in GP practices as well. So that helps bring down the percentage from other sources of revenue that just aren't coming from the doctor. So I think about 30% and aim to do better than that. So most non-GP practices are run between 28 and 35% of their their costs of their percentage of their revenue. GP practice is a little bit less. Those fees can be minimised. So I think Angela sort of touched on taking an interest in the management of the practice or the management of the staff. And someone's asked a question here today, how do you do the research on a staff or a practice to see if it's a worthwhile entity to be involved with? I'd say that if you're going to take your personal professional work to a group practice, you deserve to know everything about that practice, and you should literally go and interview the practice manager, definitely interview the owners, interview the other doctors working there, get to know the nurses and the admin staff and work out whether or not they're value for money, because this is the money that you're starting to get to know if you're going to marry the practice, right? But equally, understand whether or not that group of staff, which is the biggest cost of a practice, is actually being managed. You know, simple things like position descriptions, task lists, professional development, feedback sessions. Do they have structured policies and procedures? Do they review the services? Do they have budgeting and dynamic management of the practice? If those things aren't present, for sure, there's going to be a bit of fat in that practice that is just costing too much. And it's going to drag down the quality of the service that the practice delivers you as a doctor. And if I'm the owner of a practice like that, then I'm going to be upset that my staff aren't doing the right job. And I'll tell you what, from my perspective, it's often because of poor management from the doctor owner. So this is another thing. If we're going to start up our practice, we're going to be in charge of it. We have to know how to manage it. And that's hard. That's where you can get advice. And I think if I can say, Rocky, there's someone that asked about where do you do a small business course to know how to run a practice? I think the bottom line is that learn from your colleagues, learn from your family and friends. A small business course is not going to give you all the skills you need to make the improvements here. It might teach you a little bit about reading financial reports or making budgets, but all of our friends that didn't do medicine, right, by the time they're in their mid-30s, they've gone through corporate land. They know how to cut a deal. They know how to stare down someone else and get a good deal and work in an HR environment that's you know, entirely compliant. We're learning this for the first time in our early 30s. Steep learning curve. Get some help from a management advisor. There's some on the panel today, and look for learned colleagues as well. But don't trust anyone. Read the source material yourself.
Thanks, David. Yeah. And I think probably another good thing here to consider is what do you outsource, especially at this time where you have so many things to think about. What can you outsource rather than having to say, do the small business course yourself? So I wonder if we can pop up those poll results now. It looks like that our audience tonight was on the money. So between 30 and 35% is what percentage of your billings you expect to pay towards expenses. Angela, how much does a practice cost to run from practice management perspective? And also, I'm interested to know, how can you tell? We can see from questions coming in and a little bit about what David's touched on. What's a good practice manager do? How are they to help the doctor? What is your money paying for? What's the doctor's money paying for?
Yeah, really good questions they are, Rocky. Look, David has hit the nail on the head. Thank you, David. Putting the energy and effort into your staff as an owner is really important, communicating with them. A practice manager, a good practice manager, look, we know that staffing is one of our biggest costs in private practice, and we know that they are the reason for a lot of the complaints that happen. So there really is no excuse for not being in really close association with them. Now, as you get bigger, or if you've joined a big practice, that's when you start relying on a practice manager to do that job for you, because you're too busy consulting to be managing this high risk area. So a practice manager would do things like they would definitely be meeting regularly with the principals. I like to see a practice manager meeting at least, say, weekly informally and monthly formally with their principals, and reporting back what's happening. And as a principal, the principal should be asking questions like, how are the staff going? What's happening? You know, is there any conflict out there? Are you on top of that? How are you managing that? When was the last time you talked to the staff about their scope of practice and what's expected? When was the last time they had education? We helped a practice at the end of 2019 that had a medical receptionist who absolutely blatantly breached privacy. She actually went into a file, looked at the file, and reported back to her neighbour who was going through a divorce. And the file was her husband's file, and there was a custody battle going on. Blatant breach. The practice could see that the receptionist had done this. So the practice manager and the principal called her in and dismissed her. You know, she'd signed a confidentiality statement saying that it was dismissible to breach privacy. So they dismissed her. She went to Fair Work, of course, and Fair Work contacted the practice and said, how did she know not to do that? When was the last time she had privacy training? When was the last time you reviewed your privacy policy? When was the last time she signed off on the privacy policy? And the practice couldn't show those things. So Fair Work said re-employ her. So she had signed a confidentiality statement, but it had been signed like seven years ago when she first started. That's what tends to happen in medical practice. We put the staff on, we go, yep, we've orientated them, yep, they've got a job description, sit them behind the desk, and sometimes they get, you know, a buddy system for a little while, but then they're just left and they drift off onto goodness knows what sort of a track, and all of a sudden you've got a problem. And guess what? You can't even get rid of them because you've had them for too long now and you haven't supported them along the way. So making sure that you've got really good, strong systems, which we talk about a little bit later on, so I won't go into that too much now. The other point I want to make just before we go off finances, Rocky, is doctors notoriously don't look at their financial reports. They don't understand what the financial report is telling them. And I know this for a fact because I remember I was working with a practice once, and this was before I joined Avant as a consultant manager, and I produced reports and I put a $50,000 bonus to myself in it just to see if they'd pick it up. And they actually, I gave it to them a week before the meeting. I said, look at the financial reports, bring questions to me at the meeting, blah, blah, blah. They said, yep. So we got to the meeting and I said, okay, what do you think of the financial reports, guys? And they went, yeah, and this practice is great. We're really happy. And I said, great. So you're happy with the $50,000 bonus you paid me last month? And they went, oh, really, did we? Now, let me tell you that at Avant, we hear of a lot of practice managers taking money. You think they're the most honest people in the world. You think they're your right-hand person, but they know the reports better than you do. So, hey, guys, you are the owners of this practice. You get your head around those reports. If you don't understand them, say to the practice manager, don't understand this. Explain it to me. Sit down with me, explain what this means, because that's the only way that you're going to understand it. And that also goes with when you're collecting your percentage that's left over that you're allowed to have for each dollar that you've earned for the practice. So ask the manager to show you how they've come at the figure that has been deposited in your bank account. You know, ask them how they've come at the figure that, that's the percentage of whatever you're paying in each dollar. I can also tell you that I was an expert, and it's in big inverted commas, an expert witness in a case where a doctor sued the owner of the practice for underpayment for a period of 5 years. And it was a really big case. And the practice manager and the practice principal could not really clearly show how they had come at the rate, what report they'd looked at, and how they'd come at that amount. So as a doctor, say to your practice manager, show me why I got paid $20,000 this month. Show me the report you're using. There's a few different software packages out there, but they have lots of different reports. And it's pretty easy to make a mistake with that report, especially when you're resubmitting to Medicare and things like that. So ask them to justify, ask them to show you. And you know what? If they don't like you asking that, then that's not your problem. That's their problem. Ask them nicely, but it's your right to have that information and have those reports that make sense to you. I'll hand back over, Rocky.
Yeah, no, I mean, you should never be too afraid to ask something that you don't know, especially about financial reports. I really loved your story about the $50,000 bonus. I might have to employ some of your strategies. And we have, I mean, that percentage is really important. And we've seen throughout, particularly during this COVID pandemic and the implementation of telehealth and practices changing, so drastically in the last 12 months, that percentage in people's contracts changing. So as doctors, you should be asking, what is included in that percentage? Why is it changing? Are there extra costs involved in running, for example, a telehealth practice or something? So really keep an eye out on those things. I'm going to ask David for his comments on this issue. And also, we have had a question come in. While we're talking about it, David, how much does a good practice manager earn, or how much should you expect to pay for practice management?
Yeah, so I'd take, not to avoid the question directly, but I think there's another question here to ask, and that is, what is a practice manager? And too often in the practices that I go and consult with as a practice management advisor, I find the practice manager is the oldest person in the room, or the person that's been there the longest, or the person that's known the software the longest. And literally, I think I've done some consulting with 5 different practices this week, brand new practices getting our work, and every single one of them couldn't remember at what time the secretary turned into the practice manager. So what is a practice manager? Rather than being the most senior secretary, it's a title. So practice manager is a title that understandably people in administration aspire to, because that's the pinnacle of a small business, really. It's a practice manager. As an owner or a doctor inside a business, I'd rather make the decision myself when someone takes on that title and never let anyone assume it. And I would define the role of practice manager. If you look on the Association of Practice Managers, their definition of a practice manager goes over about 13 pages. It's impossibly complicated in terms of the different roles a practice manager, according to that definition, needs to fill. And I've never met anyone that can do all those roles. Going from ethics to strategy to HR to budgeting, reporting, cultural responsibility. It's a magnificently complicated job, and no one ever does it. So no one ever does it according to that full definition. So I think, first of all, what is a practice manager? Don't let someone else tell you. If you own a practice, you define the role. And more often than not, if you're a single doctor practice or a small group practice, you do not need someone as a practice manager. You need a senior secretary or an office manager. The business part of the role, which is really important if you are going to be employing a practice manager, can be outsourced to the accountant, the lawyers, a bookkeeper, or a practice management company, because those people are specialised at doing those things. And for sure, the older secretary in the room probably doesn't have too much in the way of bookkeeping skills or business strategy behind him or her. So for me, a practice manager is a defined role, and most practices, or many practices, do not need a practice manager. They need a senior secretary. So if I do have a role that I'm defining as a practice manager, how much am I going to pay? It's going to depend on seniority and how much of those 13 pages of the AAPM definition of practice manager do they fulfill. So probably, let's say $85,000 would be around lower mid tier for a practice manager fulfilling those roles. In a busy practice with important financial KPIs and strategies, a complicated HR portfolio and a background of experience, I'd expect a practice manager could push up towards $115,000 or $120,000 if they're meeting those KPIs and positively contributing to the business. But I must say, one of my colleagues who I was asking this very stuff 20 years ago when I was a registrar, he was telling me that he was paying his only secretary as a practice manager in those days $85,000 a year, because his last 2 secretaries had quit to go and get better paid jobs everywhere else. So he was paying more money protectively to try and not lose staff. Guess what this lady did, this secretary did, who was being paid $85,000? She left after 9 months to go and get another practice manager job for another single doctor. So I think being in charge of the staff, and particularly in charge of what you define in your roles, is important. Really important take-home message. Practice managers should be into budgeting, financial reporting, strategy, HR, and providing business insights, not just the fastest typer. Modern practices outsource their business smarts. So they use a bookkeeper, right? They use a billing service. They use management advice when they need it to build their strategy or their planning, or use software to actually run some of those things rather than just dumping it on someone, forgetting it and pretending that it's all done.
Thanks, David. There were some good insights there. And I think, you know, the whole theme of tonight is really about empowering you guys to venture into private practice. And a part of that is defining the roles of a practice manager. And if you think that you're the one who's going to manage it, then you keep some of those 13 pages to yourself and manage the business in a way that you'd like to. So thank you for that. And I think, yeah, as Vicky pointed out, this analogy of marrying your practice or your practice staff is quite literal. It's not just an analogy. We see so many people at events, so many doctors at events where their spouse is the practice manager, rightly or wrongly, but it just comes with its own issues. So just be mindful of the people that you have running your business and what it means for you. David, I am going to ask one question that's come through, still in the area of finances. It's private billing or bulk billing. What are your thoughts on that? And do you recommend one, or what are your thoughts for our audience today, particularly new fellows, people starting out?
Yep. So I'm going to again slightly dodge the question rather than give you a straight answer, Rocky. And I don't mean to be evasive, but I'd like to reflect on our colleagues here to try and get them to think about these questions slightly differently. So the starting point is, what is the value of the services you bring to the table? It's a professional relationship. It's you as the doctor on one side of the table, and there's a patient asking for healthcare advice and management on the other side of the table. Now, everyone will have their own line or stake in the ground about how much they value their training and the quality they bring to that table. But it's really important to have an internal conversation, a vision of what you think you are worth. Now, bulk billing is an artificial level of value to a service that has got no basis in reality. It's slightly related to a 1983 judgment of how much something was worth, but actually doesn't have any real relationship now, other than that's the point at which the government agrees to pay for that service. Now, there are people that simply can't afford healthcare in the Australian system. If they can't pay an out-of-pocket fee, then they have to survive on healthcare using bulk billing. And as members of the society, many of us feel like we should be able to bulk bill some patients. But that's a judgment in that scenario. It's not a financial judgment of how much my value is worth in that relationship. So the starting point is to work out how much should you be earning for an interaction with a patient, an operation, a consultation, a management plan or whatever, and setting your price according to that. Now, obviously there's market forces. How many other doctors around are charging more or less? Do you have a point of difference that makes your service worth that? Is there something that you can sell that the patient wants and they're prepared to pay that dollar amount for? So they're complicated questions, but the starting point is how much to value your service, and the bulk billing rate is not necessarily a rate where anyone should start valuing their service. I never bulk bill an employed person unless they're employed as a doctor or a nurse on one of the wards that I've worked at, full stop, or they're a family, cousins or whatever staff. Orientate your services towards value for money. So don't cut your service because you're not getting any money. Increase your money because you're giving good value, right? If your colleague's going to bulk bill and give a 5-minute discussion and the patient goes home confused, and you give a 15-minute discussion, the patient's really happy, gives you a 5-star Google rating, you can charge an extra 3 times that amount, right? So don't drop your service for the value, increase your money to meet your service, and exceed the expectations of your patients. Be a good person, do your best medicine, and charge for it. Charge for it with a smile, not because you're taking money you don't deserve, but because you value it. And guess what? Your patients probably value it. When my wife had a superficial vein thrombosis at the birth of our first daughter, and I'm second daughter, sore leg, poor lady, she's really uncomfortable. I have no idea any vascular surgeons around the area, and I was thinking, how do I judge of who I should call at 8 o'clock this Friday morning to find out what we do about her poor sore leg? And I picked up and I looked at the list in the yellow pages or the whatever is online. I was going for the professor, and I was happy that he was going to be charging the most because I just wanted the best advice. And most people shopping for doctors do not look for the cheapest doctor. If, however, and the market forces say, look, there's 20 bulk bill doctors and everyone's going to bulk bill doctors down the road, don't be just one of them. Actually, what are you good at doing in medicine? And open up right next to them and offer something different. And guess what? You'll find people at charge. Now, I recognise that's challenging, that's hard, and difficult if you are in primary care, for example, and you just don't have the body of people behind you. But I think take that approach to start with, and then you've got a different answer to what about the mix of bulk billing and private billing.
David, can I add to that as well, just with my perspective in general practice? And I would really echo what you said about, valuing your services and thinking about what your point of difference is. I think particularly in the field of general practice, we're going to get a lot more, bulk billing practices, mixed billing practices versus private billing practices. And I think, a lot of people may not feel confident to, enter the world of private billing as a GP. And I think it's because there's a real stigma almost amongst the community that, healthcare is free. I should be free to see my GP. Well, it's not free to see your dentist. It's not free to get your nails done. And I think, with all the training that we've done, and particularly as GPs, it is a specialty training in its own right as well. If you do, if you have done some extra training in, whether it's, skin or women's health or some sort of extra, vocational training, and you have a service to offer and you're offering your time, I think that patients would feel that it is worth their money. And so I would really encourage that. And that's from experience as well. I mean, I certainly work in an area with about 10 different practices, and we are one of the few private billing practices. And you just have to find, a point of difference and something that you are able to offer and be confident in your consultation abilities and the services that you have to offer.
That's great. Thank you, Vicky and David. I love that sentiment, Vicky. Like when you put it in those terms, you pay to get your nails done, you pay for an experience at a restaurant or something. Why wouldn't you pay for healthcare, something that's so important to you as an individual? And David, I also wrote down, be a good person and charge with a smile. And I mean, all doctors are smart. We know that. It takes a lot of grit and resilience and smarts to get through, but great doctors are compassionate and can connect with people. So that can really be your point of difference when you are thinking about the service that you provide. We have one final poll question. We've probably maybe hinted at the answer already, but I wonder if you could hazard a guess as what you think your biggest expenses will be. I can see those answers coming through thick and fast, and one is certainly becoming the majority. But while we wait for that to finalize, and just quickly, what do you think from your risk management and seeing doctors day in, day out? What's one of their main concerns? What keeps them up at night?
Doctors care about patient outcomes. Otherwise, you wouldn't be a doctor. So when you're worried about the patient outcome, that's what's going to keep you awake at night. And that's things like, your recalls, your follow-up. How are you going to do that? How are you going to manage follow-up when you're not in the practice? Who's looking after follow-up, when you're on holidays or when you've operated on somebody and you've gone home to bed and the patient's gone home? Follow-ups are a really big issue, and getting it right is really important. Your staff are going to be a problem for you. I'm sorry, they are. And you know what? If you just keep saying, I know they're a problem, but look, I just can't be bothered, it becomes a bigger problem. I cannot tell you how many times I've been asked to come to a practice and help them sack, a receptionist, a secretary, a practice manager, a nurse who's been with them for 30 years. drives me nuts that you can come to this practice every day and be having problems with a staff member, but find it easier to go into your office and shut the door than to actually approach the problem. So they're probably the two biggest things that that come across my desk. We've had a lot of privacy breaches recently, and especially with the evolving email. So keeping current on what's happening. And this again is about communicating, finding out what your people are actually doing, that all of a sudden you go, hang on a minute, that might be a risk, you know, like, okay, we're emailing now. Okay, what are the risks with that? And that's where Avant helps you. I mean, we've got fact sheets on all those new areas that are evolving that you should be reading, and you should be giving to your team to read, so that they're batting off the same block that you are. That's probably the main ones that I can think of, Rocky.
Thank you very much. So we'll pop up those results. And the biggest expense that you all expect to pay is support staff wages. So not only do they cost you a lot, apparently they keep you up at night as well, according to you, Ange. I'm going to cut to Vicky. Vicky, if this is the thing we're spending most of our money on, more than property and more than practice equipment, what do you expect from your practice team?
That's a really good question, Rocky. But I think your practice team can really be a strength and a weakness, like I think both David and Angela have said tonight. For me personally, you know, as a doctor and in general practice, I mean, probably the staff that we work with the most are actually your reception staff, your practice manager, and your nursing staff. I mean, certainly we do, you know, liaise with other doctors, but really you spend a lot of your time liaising with the front desk and the nursing staff. And I think, you know, for me personally, I think one of the things that is incredibly important is good communication between staff. I know it sounds really cliche because our whole medical career is about good communication, but, you know, it's not just communicating, you know, it's verbal communication as well as written communication. So what are the processes internally to communicate with each other? What sort of messaging system are you using? How often do they check them? Particularly with your recalls and results. If you're getting a nurse to, you know, recall a patient for you, what are they saying to the patient? How are you actually communicating that to them? But also communicating when things have gone wrong or something that you want them to do. So, you know, from our part, it does rely on us being, you know, very clear and concise about what you want. You know, hi, you know, nurse so-and-so, I would really like you to ring this patient and I want you to make an appointment for the next 2 days. So we've got to be clear from our part, but then we're also, you know, hoping it's a two-way channel of communication for them to know when to escalate and feel comfortable to escalate to us as well if there's an issue. And also at front desk, you know, I can't say just how important it is, you know, from a reception. I mean, as doctors, we all know we often run late. It's just what happens. I mean, we try our best to run on time, but occasionally and invariably something will come up and you may run late. And so that teamwork at the front, you know, with your reception staff saying, look, I'm really sorry to the patients, the doctor's running 15, 20 minutes late, you know, offering them a cup of tea, letting them know, texting them when you're running 20 minutes late so they can come a little bit later. Those small things actually make a huge difference, you know, to when you actually pick up that grumpy patient from your waiting room. You know, thank you for waiting. But if you've warned them and you've let them know in advance, that's a huge help to you. So it does take a lot of effort right from the front to you, you know, and that sort of teamwork is super important. I think a really great practice manager who's able to manage, you know, the HR and the staff and, you know, actually having regular feedback with staff and with you as well about the feedback that you're getting from patients and from staff just builds a stronger relationship so that you can enjoy going to work and you can enjoy working with people and you don't feel afraid to raise issues that come up. So, I mean, I think staff at the end of the day is just so important. And so it is really important, if you can, to be able to pick the right people that you're working with. If you are starting your own practice and if you are choosing a practice to work in, then do interview the staff and get to know the people that you're going to be working with day in, day out, and whether you can rely on them, because they can also, you know, help with efficiency as well. So you think if you've got a very, very good practice nurse, they can really help boost your billings. You know, if you've got a practice nurse supporting you with immunizations, you know, they can prepare the patient 15 minutes in advance. They can help set up for your procedures. They're going to be a real asset to you, you know, for your billings. and that ultimately is part of your work. So that's where I see that, you know, good staff, it really makes or breaks a good doctor and a good practice as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Vicky. And I mean, so many times I've said, I mean, we all kind of expect to wait, especially well, both at a GP or at another specialist. And, you know, you'll say to your friend, how good is my doctor? I love them. They always message me when they're an hour late. So simple things like that, even though they might be running late or things have changed, those simple human interactions, like just giving a heads up, really help create that rapport, start that interaction really positively, and probably end in a better outcome because the patient has come in with a better perspective, even though, you know, they might have had to change their schedule for the day for an hour or something like that.
And they can reduce complaints as well.
Definitely. I'm gonna ask David, I think, next. We do have a question that's come in about building a patient base or a referral base. So what tips do you have for building a patient base? We've spoken about now going out on your own, outsourcing specialists, getting legal advice. Now you're in there. How are you building your patient base?
Yeah, so that's one of the big fears, right? Apart from the fear of unknown of how to run a business, it's who wants to see me as a doctor. All I've done is train like all of my colleagues, and they're all better than me, and they're already going practices. How am I going to get out there? I think we've spoken about backing yourself in terms of your training, knowing what you're good at, knowing your value. So how are you going to let patients know that you're there? So let's talk about two things. Let's talk about GP practices and then referral-based practices, because they're kind of different pathways for the patient to get in there. With Hoxton Medical Practice Management, we work with a number of GP practices, and the simplest and most effective way to get patients to know that you're available is to engage with the community. Actually understand the community that you as a primary care facility is operating in. Speak to their needs, and there's going to be specific needs according to the geographical and socio-cultural circumstances of the area. I've already sort of mentioned that no one wins from the war of the cheapest of clinics, but you do have to respect the market forces around. If I know the community, I'm speaking to their needs, I'm offering services that are lacking or are relevant to their needs, then how am I going to stand out? I'm going to have a well-presented building, a little bit of money on the garden out the front, a little bit of signage, not the dusty bulk bill sign that's half hanging off the front wall. That's not going to attract people, give an expectation there's a value service inside. So that's pretty important. Providing an engagement with patients and that really comfortable follow-up, the sort of thing you said about messaging your patients, or, you know, checking on Mrs. Smith 3 days later to see how she went with her stitches or whatever, is a really good way of spending those extra hours when you're starting off in practice, engaging with your patients and building that rapport rather than sitting there reading the newspaper. So putting extra work in when you're not busy with your patients. Obviously, collaborating with the community includes engaging the local school, the senior citizens, the sports and community groups. So go out there, meet those people, offer services, get in doing their flu vaxes or whatever to go out and engage and be relevant to the community. You might work with the PHN to find out areas of needs. And there are services that will do market analysis to work out how many patients are going where in your local community. So it's possible to get some pretty detailed market analysis. If you're in a referral-based practice, so a non-GP specialist out there, well, you need referrals. So you need to identify your point of difference. It's going to make you stand out as the next general surgeon compared to the 20 others that have introduced themselves in the last 4 years. Communicate that point of difference to the GPs who are going to be referring to you, and actually make it personal. Go and offer them some education about your special area of interest. Make sure you're really available for those phone calls, and offer to take a phone call from them when they've got a patient in the room so you can solve their problems. You're not going to bill for it, but you're going to have a referring doctor for the rest of your practicing life. That's super important. So there's no way around it. You have to do the effort to go and meet people. I was going to say skin on skin, like shaking hands. We don't do that these days. But do go and meet people, or Zoom them, or make yourself known, support them. Create a demand. So the first thing I did before I came back from my PhD in London, where I was working on Parkinson's. Before I came back to Melbourne, I called the Parkinson's Society in Melbourne. I said, I want to do all your talks for the next 6 months to patients, to GPs, to whoever. And I created a massive amount of demand for that. Support groups are really good at getting your name around. Create web content that talks to the patients that you want to see. So if you don't want to see patients with chronic pain, don't put it on your website. If you want to see patients who need a special type of hip operation, that's what you're going to have on your website, you know. And just be patient yourself. You can't fill a consulting session in less than about 6 months, reliably fill it if you're coming off a blank canvas. As a referred doctor, I think you're about on par if you're filling a consulting session every 6 months. That is 2 years down the track, you've got 4 half days full of patients reliably. Doesn't happen faster than that. But if you follow those rules, it's going to be good quality growth.
That's some good perspective. Thank you, David, and some good markers to kind of work out where you're at. Vicky, I'd be interested in your comments on this area, how to, grow your patient base as someone who's a little bit earlier in her career compared with David, and in the general practice area as well.
Yeah, look, thanks, Rocky. Look, I really echo the sentiments that David's sort of said so far. And I think as a GP, on the other end, I suppose as being the referrer, what I appreciate, from a specialist, particularly a new specialist, because, we don't always know when you're fellow. We've got, lots and lots of people graduating every day. But if you're starting up a new practice, we do like a door knock. We do like a letter. We do like to meet you in networking events. And I can't tell you the number of specialists that I've met just, over like a networking or a lecture, and I think I'm going to refer a few patients to this doctor. And we do a little bit of try before you buy, because we're sussing you out. We're trying to work out, okay, how, you've given me your mobile number. I'm not going to ring you for everyone, but if I genuinely do need advice, how responsive are you? How good is your letters when they come back? And I ask my patients, what did you think of the specialist? Would you recommend them to friend or family? And they're the markers that we use. For us and even for patients, websites, we look at websites together, sometimes and look at specialists, which is why it's so important that, like David said, just even the look of the practice, the look of the website, all that is actually quite important, because that's what people have, for first sort of glance about what you're going to be like. For us, I think in general practice, depending on what sort of practice you are in, so if you're in an established practice, well, there's probably going to be an established patient base, and over time, it does take time as well to build your patient base. It'll be a combination of inheriting patients, and patients will also come to you if you've got something different to offer. If you're really interested in mental health, for example, and you spend a lot of time with patients, people will hear about it and they'll tell their friends and their family, and they'll come in and speak to you. And that's going to be a really strong referral base amongst general practice patients. If you're a new practice, it is a lot like David, sort of, the referral based kind of clinics, where you do have to get to know your community, get your name out there, local newspaper, attend events, really get your name out there, speak to allied health. So, a lot of the times we engage services of our local physio, dietitian, and if they know who you are and you're sending patients to them and they think, oh, this doctor's, really cares about their patients, they'll actually send other patients back to you as well. So we all kind of help each other out and we all support each other. So it's good to set up a good network of both specialists, other GPs and allied health as well, for the community.
I love that test, Vicky, and it's probably a good rule to live by. Would you send your family or friends there? And especially as doctors yourselves, you know that it's part of your ethical obligations to make sure that you do have your own GPs. And so who are you going to see? And if one of your friends and relatives asks you, oh, can I come and see you? You know that you're not allowed to do that. Who are you going to send them to? So it's a really good test for you all. And so I'll go to Ange next. Ange, you've consulted in the area how practices can grow their patient base. But you also help doctors with making sure that they're advertising within the guidelines set out by AHPRA. You know, advertising in healthcare is in the national law. That's complemented by AHPRA guidelines. It's also in Code of Conduct Good Medical Practice. There's lots of different areas that govern this area of advertising, and you help doctors day in, day out with it. So what are your tips here so they can advertise but stick within the rules?
Properly. Thanks, Rocky. Yeah, Vicky mentioned your website, which is a really great way to get information out there. And we're often seeing social media being used as well. Facebook is being used, but it is a bit of a bane for us at Avant. In the risk team, we are often asked to review websites and social media platforms to make sure that they stay within the AHPRA guidelines. So the point I want to make here to you is being a medical practitioner comes with great responsibility. You know that. And what the guidelines are designed for is to make sure that you're not misleading patients. So the AHPRA guidelines, they recognise that that information is important and helpful for your patients, and it's an effective way to communicate. But they also recognise that some of the words that doctors use can be misleading, and because you're saying it, a patient will naturally believe it. So you can say, you know, I am a state-of-the-art doctor doing the most modern the most modern management of this particular disease, and a patient will believe you. So you can't say that. So you can't be false or misleading in any way. You can't be deceptive in any way. But the guidelines they're really quite easy to read. They've just been reviewed recently in the last couple of months, and they're really quite an easy read. So please have a look and get whoever's designing your website and managing your Facebook page to have a look at them. Things like testimonials, you can't have them. You can't have them. And if you allow comments on your Facebook page, you lose control of the page. So all of a sudden you can have testimonials and not even know about it. So be really careful what you're saying. Just keep in mind that whatever you say, a patient's going to believe. So make sure that you're being honest. And if you're saying, you're world leading, well, how do you substantiate that? If you're saying you're providing a risk-free procedure because you're not cutting, how do you substantiate that? Is that false? Is that making the patient do something that they think they'll do because it's risk-free? So just be really careful with the AHPRA guidelines, and it's really just about not being false or misleading.
Thanks, Ange. And I think that, when I'm speaking to doctors on our medico-legal advice line, one of the things that surprises them most is that they can't use testimonials. And they've seen their colleagues do it, so why can't they use it? And also, if they are using social media and people are putting in comments, I had a great experience and the outcome was great, they don't realize that comments on their own social media platforms are counted as testimonials. So it is quite a fraught area. There is, though, as you said, lots of guidance, and AHPRA did just update their guidelines in December 2020. It also comes with the whole advertising hub on their website, so I encourage you to read it. They have great scenarios: do this, don't do that, words that you can use, like you pointed out, Ange, words that invoke some kind of comparison are generally a no-no. So have a look at those. And ring Angela and the risk team at Avant if you want your websites reviewed. I'm going to move to Vicky now. Vicky, we know we support so many members at Avant with the dreaded audits from Medicare. Medicare is sometimes so confusing for new doctors who are starting out. How did you find using and billing the MBS item numbers? And what are your tips for new fellows using them for the first time?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think Medicare, like David mentioned earlier, pretty much underpins our whole practice. I mean, that's how we make money. And the crazy thing is, I want to ask the audience is how many of you have actually read the MBS or aware of, all the item numbers? I'd venture to say probably, not too many are that familiar. And I think that's the crazy thing is because we are using the MBS but a lot of us don't understand it. And so the advice I would give would be, one, yes, you should, listen to your colleagues and your mentors in terms of how to open a practice and their business acumen, but you shouldn't follow them when it comes to Medicare billing. Because actually, as doctors, we are responsible for everything that we bill. So even for your registrars in practice, your GP registrars, be wary of your supervisor, changing your billings or telling you how to bill something. You are responsible for your provider number and all the billings that go through. So you need to be, one, completely sure that what you've billed meets the Medicare requirements of the schedule. And two, that your documentation actually substantiates what you've done. So they're probably the two tips that I would sort of say. I think for whatever specialty or whatever field you're in, there are so many, numbers, but get familiar with the numbers that are commonly used in your field, whether that's general practice, as a physician, as a surgeon. Know what they entail and make sure that what you do and what you bill is in keeping with that. And documentation is going to be your best defense. I don't think I could make it any clearer than that, Rocky.
No, I think all Avant employees are probably tattooed with that. It's our mantra. No notes, no defense. Good notes, good defense. And that is for civil trials, for complaints to regulators, and to Medicare audits. David,
That's right.
David, do you have anything extra to add about Medicare from a neurologist's point of view?
Absolutely not. Vicky said it absolutely. And I'll just reiterate, know your numbers back to front. Know them. It's too easy to read them. It takes half an hour. Document everything you do and why it was necessary to do, and just make a good effort to keep your referrals and your notes in order. It's simple, but hard in the day-to-day run of things. So set up your management to allow those things to happen.
Yeah, and just on that, actually, just be wary, don't let your reception or your administrative staff, have control over the billings. And that's kind of going back to those financial reports that Angela was talking about earlier, is you've got to reconcile what you bill. So, on your end, you might be putting through a particular item number, but you've got to be sure that on the other end, that's what's being submitted. So check your billings, be sure of what you billed and make sure that that's what you put through and they haven't been changed or anything like that. Believe me, it does happen.
Yeah, we know all too well that does happen. Angela, I wonder if you had any final tips for Medicare about the processes that, as doctor owners, they can implement in their practice to help protect them and to make sure that they don't fall foul of the Medicare rules.
Yeah, look, I think the only thing I'd add, and I think David and Vicky were beautiful what they've said, that's great. The only thing is have a written process for billing, because it does act as some evidence for you if there is a problem and you do get a Medicare audit and you notice some fraudulent activity going on that you weren't in control of. So have a written policy on billing and how that happens in your practice.
Thanks, Angela. I am just going to take a little break to answer a question from the audience. It's about the topic back on advertising. They've asked, what about pages you didn't set up, which include testimonials, both positive and negative without your permission, and things like Google reviews and rate MDs. The rules are only for pages which you have control over. So, AHPRA does recognise that there are sites out there like Google that you don't have control over, and people may leave you testimonials on those. If you don't have control, you can't be expected to take them down. Those rules are about pages that you control. So your Facebook, your Instagram, your own websites, you shouldn't have patient testimonials, or sorry, not patient. It actually doesn't include all testimonials. It just includes testimonials that are about the clinical service. So they're able to say, it was a lovely office, you spent all the money on the great views, or it was easy to find a car park or something like that.
Rocky, could I just add one thing to that? But AHPRA would not like to see that you are directing patients to leave testimonials on those sites. So please don't send them a link to a Google site to say, please leave us a testimonial. That would not, if AHPRA saw you doing that, they would not be happy.
Yeah, that's a really good tip, and we have helped out doctors in that space. So thank you very much, Angela. That brings us to the end of our webinar tonight. So before we say goodnight, I'm going to give our panelists one last chance. We've got 6 minutes, so you have 2 minutes each to give your final message. I am going to start with David, please, your last tip for tonight.
Thanks, Rocky, and everyone. Look, this is a truly exciting part of that journey from high school to fully fledged professional. It's a well-trodden pathway, and I think everyone here who's feeling nervous about everything they've heard or nervous about the journey forward, just remember that you're not alone. You're in a great position because you're asking the right questions now. Definitely invest in advice, get a good accountant, a solicitor. And someone was asking, well, who's a practice management consultant? Well, one of the reasons I'm talking here is because I run a practice management consultancy. Probably there'll be a link to be able to book a free chat, no obligation chat with me to ask some of the questions you haven't been able to get through tonight. But there's other people that give some leadership in this area as well. Don't just follow what your mentors do. Don't expect to be a medical business management expert, and just don't go and buy a building without a plan. That's a funny thing to say, right? But I tell you what, doctors that go and buy real estate then decide to build a practice, they got the things wrong way around. That is, just be methodical and plan things out as if you don't know what you're doing, because you may not. And when it's written in a plan, then it's going to make a lot more sense to you. Be happy to help out, and thanks for the opportunity to chat tonight, everyone.
Thank you, David. Angela, you're up next.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'd like to leave you with, you don't play a board game without a set of rules, so don't try and run your practice. Get your policies and procedures in place. Whether you're a specialist practice or a GP practice, there are a set of rules that you need to be setting your practice up on. They're the foundation. For general practice, it's the RSCGP standards for general practice. For specialist practice, it's the NSQHS standards. So have a look at them. Your policies and procedures are really, really important. They will support you when something goes wrong. They will make sure things are happening properly while you're in the room with the door closed consulting with your patients. So get your rules right. Have a look at Practice Hub. It's an Avant product that you can get a demonstration online. It goes through some of the important issues that you need to have in place as a foundation for this great practice that you're going to be with for a long, long time. That's it from me, Rocky. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. And finally, our voice of the audience tonight, Dr. Victoria Fan, closing messages.
Thank you. Well, I guess my closing message is congratulations, because if you've made it to this point, you've clearly finished all your training. It's been a really long and hard road. The crazy thing is it's just the beginning, and getting started in private practice is a whole new world, and it's daunting, but don't be afraid to ask for help. I think my biggest tip is, look, at this point, you're a doctor, you're good at the medicine. That's what you're an expert at, but you're not an expert at, being a business owner, a practice manager, an accountant, a lawyer. That's not going to come, overnight. So know where to get help, and know to reach out, use your resources, because that's something we're really good at is, getting help essentially. So don't be afraid to ask for help, whether it's, your mentor, it's Avant, it's David, whoever it is, get the assistance that you need in the areas that you don't know. And I think that way you'll get the best sort of result for you in your practice. And all the best.
Thank you, Victoria. I echo those sentiments. Have a plan or plan to fail, play by the rules, call us for some advice. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thank you, David. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Victoria. All the links and things that we've spoken about tonight will be sent to you next week in an email. But in the meanwhile, if you can't wait, we do have a Getting Started in Private Practice website, and it has lots of the information that we spoke about tonight and some useful resources on there as well. So check it out. And please do the survey at the end of this webinar. You can pop in things that you did like, you didn't like, or any suggestions for future webinars. So you can really help us guide what you want to know about, essentially. And if you are looking for those CPD points, then certainly do the survey, because that's how you'll get them. So once more, thank you again for joining us, and good night.